All right, so now we are going to talk about actually setting a runtime command. This is the command that's executed when your Docker image actually starts running. So when you do docker run my image and then a command, you can always set that command like just on the command line like we did before, or you can also set it in your Dockerfile, which is nice because it's always one less thing to remember, and I love having one less thing to remember. So as usual, we have our Dockerfile. This is just this is our typical Dockerfile with from Continuum IO miniconda. You know, we install all of our things. This particular application is a Flask application. Flask is a web service for Python. It's a way of building like web interfaces and things. So, you know, all the way down here, what I'm saying is we want to build out all of our dependencies. We want to copy our files. We want to do all of our things. And then when it's actually time for the container to start running, I want for it to start running our Flask application. And you can see here that you could do command cmd, and then you open up like your, oh my god, what are these called? You open up your brackets. I hope they're brackets, and and then you actually set your command. One thing is to be specific about your shell. So just to kind of be safe, I always do bin bash and then this -c. So just, you know, don't even worry about why it's like that. It's a little bit weird. Just do it. Just set it like that. It will make your life much easier. And then I'm saying start Flask app. And this, I know that this is the file path because this is where I put it. I'm going to get into all of that later, exactly how the files are copied, exactly how this project is structured. But for right now, I just want for you to know that as a runtime command, I am saying, hey, start up this application from this shell script here, which is sitting in this location in this Dockerfile. And I can even show it to you pretty quickly. It's just start Flask app. And then it's running under Gunnicorn, which is like a Python way of, I think it's Python anyways, of actually deploying web applications. Yeah, it's Python. So, you know, Gunnicorn, workers, I tell it where to bind. You definitely want this 000 thing when you're working in Docker containers, because if you have localhost, you can't always access it from outside. But for right now, don't worry about that. And then, you know, this is exactly the way that you would run a Flask application using Gunnicorn, like at any given time. This is how you do it. So that's how we set it in the Dockerfile as well. Hey Docker, you know, set this at runtime. And then if you actually want to, we can see how this works. I have this handy run Docker image. And you can actually see there's two different ways to run this. So Docker run, this is, okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. This is how I ran things before in the previous examples, and I'm going to show you both ways so that you can see them. So this is Docker run, exposing the ports, setting some environmental variables, running the name of the container, and then this is the actual command that we are executing. So I am going to show you this just so that you can see it. Okay, and then you can see it starts up. It starts up because we have this command here. What you put here is actually going to override what you have in the Dockerfile. So I don't know why that won't exit. Anyways, that's fine. Oh, and then it's telling me port 5000 is already allocated. That's fine. We can just do it like this. So then this time I'm running it and I'm not specifying the command because we have that specified in the Dockerfile. Oh, and 5001 is already in use too. I end up using a lot of ports somehow on my computer. I'm kind of like a digital hoarder, and I don't always like pay attention to what's running and what's not, which is bad. Don't do that. Pay attention to what's running. Do as I say and not as I do, as I always tell my kids. Okay, so then you can see here it's also running starting Gunnicorn. This is what we have starting up in this process here, which is what we set in our Dockerfile right here. So you can see here it's command, here it's just running it, like it's, you know, Docker run, parameters, name of the image, and then command. But they're still both doing the same thing. So that was how to show you that. So you can specify your runtime command either here directly on the command line, or you can do it through your Dockerfile. And I think that was all that I wanted to show for that. And now my brain is just kind of gone a little bit, and you can see that. Oh, so I was just going to show you very, very quickly. Again with the ports. Okay, here it's 5,000 on the host and 5,000 in the container. That's because we have Gunicorn set up as binding on port 5,000, and I think the default port in Flask is 5,000. So then just to show you that one quickly. Okay, here we go. Status okay. That's because in my Flask application, it's not even really like a full application. It just has a couple health checks just for demonstration purposes. And one of those is that it just prints out status okay when you fetch the page like this. So that's it. I hope that you can see the difference between specifying your runtime command in your Dockerfile versus specifying it on the command line. Later on, we're going to get into also how to specify it in actually a Docker Compose file, which then lets you, really get going with deploying your applications with Docker Swarm, with Kubernetes, with whatever you want to do. I'm really hoping that you can start to see how all of this builds. Like, none of this is just kind of off in its own world being its own thing, right? Everything builds. When you set environmental variables, you can do that in the Dockerfile. You can do that on the command line directly through run. Then, it's exactly the same thing with the command. It's the same thing with the user. Almost any parameter that you can set through the Docker, just directly through the Dockerfile, you can set on the command line using Docker run. And then you can also set it using Docker Compose, because they're all just building on each other. And then eventually with Docker Swarm and Kubernetes, you can do the exact same thing. So, it seems like there's a lot of moving pieces and everything is a little bit different. They're not. They're all using exactly the same stuff. It's all the same. You're setting environmental variables, you're running shell commands, you're, just generally trying to get your work done. And this is how you do it. And this is how you learn. How all the layers build upon themselves, so that then eventually you can start deploying. So that's it for this lesson. Next, we're really going to start to deep dive into how you use Docker Compose. And once you start to get started with Docker Compose, that's really when you can take your applications and you can really have, dev stacks that very closely mirror your production stack. You can use those as your precursors for some really cool and really awesome deployments. That's really where we start going. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next lesson.